to the Conception Channel podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Conception Channel, a podcast brought to you by the Being Fertile program and Instill Reproductive Wellness. I am your host, Spence PENTLAND. And today, as I say, almost every podcast, but today especially, I'm really excited to be able to speak with our very special guest, Dr. Alice Domar. Thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure, Spence. Thanks for inviting me.
Excellent. She is going to help us all better understand, because I mean, if there's an expert in the field on stress and fertility, it would be Alice. And we're going to try and dive into psychological impacts of maybe pregnancy loss and how alternative medicine may impact fertility as well, and the efficacy also of psychological intervention. So I'm very excited. But first, I'm going to give you a run through your CV here briefly, and please, like I said before we hit record, correct me. But you got in 1980, you got your BA at Colby College in Maine. And in 86, you got your Ph.D. in health psychology at Yeshiva in New York. And in 87, you got your became licensed in Massachusetts as a clinical psychologist. From there, she has gone on to author or co-author 7 books, including one that tops. I don't know if it's ever fallen off of Amazon, like front page at least. It's called Conquering Fertility. Many of you probably know it. If not, it's something you should pick up. The co-founder of new apps, Ferticom and Fertistrong, which is the newest one. We'll go into those because those are very interesting. I'm super excited that more people will get to know about those today. Obviously a leading expert between the relationship of stress and fertility, which we talked about. And you're a board member of Resolve. It's a national, in the US, a national infertility organization for over 10 years. That is such great contribution. You're currently the executive director at Domar Centers for Mind Body Health, the director for integrative care at Boston IVF, senior staff psychologist, Department of OBGYN at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, associate professor of obstetrics and gynecology and reproductive biology, part-time at Harvard Medical School. Fantastic. Anyway, obviously there's a big story, and you've been doing this for quite some time, Alice, and thank you so much on behalf of everyone for your contributions to the world. Just before we hit record, you mentioned how things have changed. You just got an invite, and maybe you could touch on that. But to start with, in tradition with this podcast, I'd love to hear a little bit of your backstory so people kind of can connect and understand a bit more about you.
Well, it's interesting because my parents went through primary and secondary infertility. I'm the result of secondary infertility.
Okay.
And I think with my older sister, my mom wasn't getting pregnant. And she saw a specialist in California who put her on the equivalent of Valium. And boom, came along my sister.
Oh, okay.
So clearly I grew up with my mother feeling that there was a mind-body connection, with infertility.
Right.
And then as I got my Ph.D. and I wanted to focus on women's health, that was always in the back of my head. And there was a very small study done in Bogota, Colombia, in South America. I think they took 14 women who had unexplained infertility, and 7 of them went through basically a mind-body program, and 7 of them didn't. And I think within a few weeks, 4 of the 7 women in the mind-body program got pregnant, and none of the control group got pregnant. And it was a time in my life where I was looking for something to specialize in. And out of that came the mind-body program for infertility. So I started that in September of 1987,
wow,
which is scary that was 30 years ago.
Wow.
And since then, thousands of women have gone through the program. I've trained healthcare professionals around the world how to run the mind-body program. I'm actually doing a training this week.
Okay.
And we've since then done 2 big randomized controlled trials. The first one was funded by the National Institute of Mental Health, and the second one was funded by Johnson & Johnson. And what both of them showed is that women who did the mind-body group had far higher pregnancy rates than the control group. So in the first study, it was 55% versus 20%. And the second study, it was 52% versus 20%. So, and we had observed that in the clinical mind-body program, like just women kept on getting pregnant.
Right.
And so it suggested that, in fact, there is a mind-body connection.
Wow. Okay. So were the context of these studies a little bit, were they in conjunction with IVF, or were they the control arms, or were they women just trying to conceive naturally and they were in two groups? Or
so for the first study, it was women at any trial. For the second study, it was women who were about to do their first IVF cycle.
Okay.
And so, and the pregnancy rates of the mind-body patients were almost triple that. So they were statistically significant. So the second study, actually, I think got more attention than the first study. And, it was like a prize paper at the American Society of Reproductive Medicine meeting. And I was actually I gave 5 talks in Dublin last week. And they were asking me, it was the Irish Fertility Counseling Association, IFCA. Okay. And they're asking me sort of about my career. And I said, until the second study came out, I was sort of I don't even know what the word is. I got no respect in the field. People thought I was perpetuating the myth of just relaxing to get pregnant. Anytime I went anywhere, people would make fun of me. If I would publish a paper, people would submit nasty letters to the editor. It was actually, I'd say for the first 20 years of my career, it was really hard.
You got bullied.
Oh, totally bullied. Yeah. And I understand that because, I think because of my parents' experience, I feel super protective of people with infertility. I feel like they're very, very vulnerable.
Right.
And I think there are practitioners out there who take advantage of that vulnerability. Mm-hmm. I'm just not one of them.
Right.
And so I think people felt like I was, the whole just relax and get pregnant. And, I said to someone when I was in Ireland, I said, I'm split. I'm half nerd, half clinician. Actually, I think what I said was I'm half nerd, half marshmallow. Because I'm a therapist. I see patients every day. I have a practice right in this office where I see individuals and couples. Mm-hmm. And I understand forwards and backwards the emotional hit of infertility. But I'm also a researcher, and I published dozens and dozens of studies on the relationship between stress and infertility. And it goes both ways. Infertility causes really high levels of stress. Most women going through infertility, the majority of women express sort of psychiatric levels of anxiety and depression.
Right.
And we need to do something about that.
Right.
Feeling that.
I mean, if I may, in my practice, what I feel like I've observed is, and let me know what you think of this, is I feel that infertility becomes its own cause if it wasn't at this, okay.
Yep, I agree.
So what? So can you go into the basics of stress and infertility? Maybe I don't know what's the physiology or the impact and how that translates to people.
Well, I think the most important thing people need to remember is that infertility causes a lot of stress. And the reason it causes a lot of stress is it impacts every aspect of an individual's life. It affects their relationship with their partner, because I have never in my career seen 2 members of a couple in the same place at the same time. It affects their sex life, because they often are told when they should or should not have sex. People start to associate sex with failure. It becomes no fun. It impacts their relationship with their family, because in all likelihood, their siblings are getting pregnant. It impacts their relationship with their friends, because in all likelihood, all their friends are getting pregnant. It affects their job, because coworkers are getting pregnant, and because you can't, do an IVF cycle if you have work obligations. It affects your financial security, because treatment's really expensive. And it can affect your relationship with God, because people feel like it's the first time that God has unanswered their prayers. So here you have a disease, because it is classified as a disease by the World Health Organization. Here you have a disease that affects every aspect of your life, and yet women are still blamed for it. Like pretty much every patient I've seen in my career has been told by someone, just relax and you'll get pregnant.
Right.
And can you imagine someone saying that to someone who's diagnosed with cancer? Oh, just relax, your cancer will go away. I mean, that's a horrible thing to say to somebody. And it's making the assumption that infertility is solely caused by stress. And that's not true. Infertility is a disease. And in the vast majority of cases, there's a physiological reason. It's an ovulation issue, or a tubal issue, or a uterine issue, or half the time it's a male factor issue. And, you know, you can go sit in one of those water tanks for 10 years. And if your tubes are blocked, you're not going to get pregnant.
Right.
So, but just like infertility causes a lot of stress, you then have to look at, well, how does stress contribute? And, you know, I don't think stress per se causes most cases of infertility, but I think once one starts treatment, I think it can contribute. And the reason I know it does is because if you look at the data of people in treatment, if a woman were to do some kind of psychological intervention, you know, whether it's a mind-body group or a support group or whatever, the statistics show she's far more likely to get pregnant.
Right.
And we also know that these interventions make her less anxious and less depressed. So I do not believe in the myth of just relaxing to get pregnant, but I do believe, because what the data shows, is that doing some kind of psychological intervention does increase significantly your chances of having a baby.
Right. So sometimes just moving the needle a little bit, like you don't need to go from here to relax. You need to come, you know, just move the needle a bit, and that can have a large impact on outcome. Exactly.
I mean, sometimes, you know, it's like with weight. If somebody is underweight or obese, one can say, okay, if you gain 5 or 10 pounds, or if you lose 10 or 15 pounds, that can just bump you into the fertile range. And I think it's the same thing with stress.
Right. I was at a conference very recently, and a mind-body practitioner there talked about the impacts. It was a talk about trauma, and she related, went as far as to say that infertility for many can be a trauma and exhibit PTSD-like symptoms within the nervous system, and it's just, you can't shut it down. So that little needle movement is what you're talking about?
Well, it's, when you talk about, because what I found is that most of my patients who get pregnant, I just got an email last week, one of my patients, she goes, I'm pregnant, but I'm not really happy. I'm actually more anxious. Mm-hmm. And it's true, most women with infertility who then get pregnant tend to be pretty anxious, at least for their first trimester. And they don't have that sort of ecstatic radiance that they expected. And I think a lot of it is infertility impacts you.
Right.
It's really hard. I mean, we published a paper about 20 years ago, I think it was 20 years ago, that showed that women with infertility have the same level of anxiety and heart disease. Mm. So the psychological impact of infertility is equivalent to facing a potentially terminal illness.
Right.
And I think people need to understand that.
Yeah. That's, that's very motivational as well for people to step into, say, mind-body programs, or just nurture themselves as if they were pregnant, as they would when they're pregnant. Take really good care of themselves in so many ways. And I've heard recently, on the male side of things, which I'm excited to get further strong here, but the semen analysis or male factor infertility more now these days is pointing toward, or correlating at least, to future health concerns. So it's that for men is an indicator, and that helps some men step into this process as well with their wife. I've seen in my clinical practice, which is really, really nice when there's they're both really trying to move toward their dream. Mm-hmm. What about, okay, so that's infertility. What about the impact of people who are getting pregnant. It's such, and having miscarriage or recurrent pregnancy loss. It's so different, it seems to be. So what's your experience or your understanding there?
Well, I would say it's certainly medically different because they're having miscarriages as opposed to infertility.
Right. I'm
not sure the psychology is all that different. I mean, it's interesting that I wrote a review article a number of years ago, the psychological consequences, excuse me, I have the hiccups, of recurrent pregnancy loss. I can't get it published. No one seems to care.
Huh.
I've submitted it to 4 or 5 journals. I've tried to submit it as a book chapter. No one seems to want to read about. And I can pregnancy loss. It's, women have had a recurrent pregnancy and have, numerous live births. They still carry that pain with them. It's excruciating. And for them, getting pregnant is very anxiety growth. I have a patient right now who had, I can't remember how many losses she's had. So she's actually using a surrogate to fix the issues that were causing the miscarriages. And I can tell you, my husband is bouncing off the walls. So, because it's trauma. You lose a pregnancy, that's a real loss. Yeah. I know our society doesn't understand that. They think, if it was before 12 weeks, sort of who cares? And if they're pregnant, it's a baby. And you could miscarry a week later. My 2 kids, I think it was about 6 weeks. And you know what? It was devastating. And the only people I got real support from were people who had also had a pregnancy loss.
Right.
Who really got it.
It's a different club. Yeah, it is. It's funny how, in your career for sure, even in mine, which is shorter, about 15 years working in the reproductive health field, I have seen such a difference in the way, in public perception and understanding of fertility. But the same miscarriage seems to be lagging so far behind. And it's funny, I was talking to a reporter about this a couple of weeks ago, and I said, you were totally too young to remember this, but I remember when Gerald Ford's wife, Betty Ford, sort of revealed to the media that she had breast cancer. And then the vice president's wife, Happy Rockefeller, told the world she had breast cancer. And everyone was like, oh my God, these women are talking about their breast cancer. And it's revolutionized how women, when a woman's diagnosed with breast cancer now, the world is supportive, Yeah. And I've been waiting for 30 years or whatever it is for infertility and pregnancy loss to follow suit. And yes, it's gotten better. There's no question. There, once a month in People magazine, there's a celebrity talking about either her miscarriage or her. I think we did a study in Europe. We published it 3 years ago that showed still the majority of women don't tell anybody. And, if you tell someone, you're making yourself vulnerable for them saying stupid things. Right.
But you also open the possibility that either they went through infertility or they know somebody. And, I remember, and I told everyone when I miscarried, because we got so much support. So, what your needs are.
Okay, so how about, mind body, and that must involve a lot of other alternative approaches within your practice. I'm not totally positive, but can you speak to your experience and the effectiveness that you've seen, probably largely connected with Boston IVF, I think, correct?
Right. Yeah, we have a huge integrated care center here at Boston IVF. We had over 6,000 patient visits last year.
Wow. Just
to the integrated care center. And so we have the mind body group. We have 3 psychologists who do cognitive behavior therapy. We have a nutritionist who's actually underweight or overweight. And then we have 5 acupuncturists. Mm-hmm. We have 4 rooms. They're going all the time. We offer acupuncture 7 days a week, several evenings, and that's our busiest practice. Mm-hmm. In terms of, I don't ever use the word alternative.
Yeah.
Or complementary care, because I don't think what we do is alternative.
Right.
I think all of us have spent our careers trying to integrate and be a part of Western medicine. And I don't think, and the way I put it is, if you are coming for infertility treatment, if you're just seeing a physician, you're not getting complete care.
Right.
But if you're just seeing an acupuncturist or a psychologist, you're also not getting complete care. I really think you need to think of a holistic approach.
Right. Okay. So, so within that realm, you said nutritionists, you said psychologists or clinical counselors, my terminology in Canada might be a little different.
That's okay.
Yeah, and acupuncturist. So what I've read some statistics in some places, and I don't know the validity of them, but the amount of or percentage of people that are utilizing these, let's just for sake of simplicity call them alternative or complementary.
Let's say complementary.
Yeah, complementary in this instance for sure. Is there a large percentage of women more now? Probably because of what you're doing. Boston is a high percentage, but what's it look like across the U.S.?
I think acupuncture is pretty popular by Paulus, and so I think a lot of infertility patients will do acupuncture. Yeah. There are very few infertility centers in the U.S. that have integrative centers on site like we do,
right?
Because it's a huge investment of space and time and money.
Yeah.
So I think most practitioners who work with infertility patients are probably working in their own practice.
Yeah.
Prefer. Again, as I said, I'm half nerd and very focused on what the research shows. And in fact, we just had a meeting with our acupuncturists a little while ago, and I'd gone to China in December, and I met with one of the clinics and was meeting with their acupuncturist, and they were finding some really good results with what's called electroacupuncture,
right?
Which is, as opposed to needles, it's like little tiny discs, and there's a little tiny bit of electrical current. Right. And they're finding really great results with increasing blood flow to the pelvis using electroacupuncture.
Right.
And so I was talking to our acupuncturist about integrating it here. And, luckily for me, two of the acupuncturists here are Chinese.
Right.
And I said to them, can you look at the data?
Right.
And so that we can decide if there's enough research to support the efficacy of adding a new modality.
Yeah.
We do not do herbs here because as of today, there still has not been a randomized controlled prospective trial supporting the use of herbs or supporting the safety of herbs.
Yeah.
However, if the study came out tomorrow showing they're safe and effective, we would change our protocol.
Right. Okay.
I worry about patients who are told too much. There's a practitioner in Boston who tells patients that she can bring down their FSH levels so they get pregnant. Mm-hmm. And as far as I know, there is nothing we know of that can bring down FSH levels and increase pregnancy rates. Right. A high FSH level tends to be an indication that there aren't a lot of healthy eggs in one's ovaries.
Right.
And as I said, I feel very protective of infertility patients, and I want to make sure that they get not just responsible care from a clinic, which is sometimes in doubt, but they also get responsible care from those of us who practice integrative care.
Right, of course. And that's, I love the movements toward more professional integration and more professional accountability on the acupuncture side. That's what I can speak to at least.
Right.
Because, these lofty claims, from my perspective, acupuncture can do a lot for the stress and for the environment, and whether the FSH took a dip that cycle and there was a nice ovulation, that's great.
Right.
I don't know what caused that, but if we can optimize for that cycle where that does happen, and there's a nice environment, there's lots of blood flow, and there's a relaxed patient, hopefully that contributes to success. That's my view these days. But what about the the psychological aspects, and maybe you could speak to both of these. Also on the male side, what you're seeing, and the participation on the male side, which traditionally, maybe it's because they don't carry the pregnancy, maybe it's because our traditional medical model doesn't have many treatments besides ICSI or IUIs that might help with sperm conditions that are unfavorable. But how do you see the psychological and the complementary medical practices helping men?
Men in our field are ignored. And I think we found that when we were creating the app for men. If you look at the data, there are, I don't know, at least half a dozen studies, randomized controlled prospective studies supporting the efficacy of acupuncture for male factor infertility. We have a male acupuncturist here, and I've talked to our andrologist about referring more patients here, and it just hasn't happened, even though there's really nice data showing that that acupuncture can be effective for male factor. Psychologically, when I see the couple together, she will say, we never talk about infertility. He doesn't care. He just thinks I'm a pain. And when I talk to the man alone, I'll say, I want a baby just as much as she does. Mm-hmm. I am devastated. Mm-hmm. But one of us has to hold it together. Yeah. And if she's a wreck, I have to appear strong. Now, Lori Pash, who's a psychologist at University of California, San Francisco, published a study maybe a year and a half ago, which actually, remember I said the majority of women are depressed and anxious? The data on men was stunning. I mean, these guys, their rates of depression and anxiety are not as high as women, but they're still scary high. And Resolve, which is a national infertility organization in the U.S., put out a survey a couple months ago looking at the distress levels of men. And, we've got to do something. That's why we came out with the male app, because there's really nothing out there for men. They're supposed to just suck it up and be strong for their wives and not care. Well, let me tell you, they do care.
Right. Yeah. I have the same experience. And I unfortunately believe it starts in there just being very little follow-up. I don't know the legitimacy of it. It came from a urologist that is quite respected, that said, he'll go as far to say that IVF is one of the worst things that's happened to men's health in general, in the last 40, 50 years. Anyway, I'm not getting political here, but he said that his statistic was somewhere around the number of 12% of men. That's such a small number that actually even get to the point of getting a semen analysis done, which is staggering, and I hope that's wrong. But
well, no, I mean, if a couple goes see a physician because of infertility, 100% of men should be getting a semen analysis. I mean, you can't assume that fertility is a woman's issue, because it's just as likely.
Yeah. Well, so that to me is that semen analysis is a front line, and then there is and that if there's something that shows in there that points in another direction, that should be investigated. Low something as simple as low volume should be, there should be physical exams and blockage ruled out, and so much of the time this doesn't happen. And so I think that complacency is A, just us being men, and B is that we're not going to carry the pregnancy, and we maybe somehow, what you're saying though is we are as attached to the outcome, but we don't get ushered in, to taking accountability in the same way. So that reflects in how we act.
Well, I think for men, like the sperm count or the sperm parameters, if they're abnormal, I think for men they associate that with masculinity and virility, and it's very scary to have that challenged.
Right.
When in fact, the amount of healthy sperm one produces has nothing to do with sexual prowess. It doesn't. But I think a lot of men, I have a patient right now whose husband's a firefighter,
right?
And it's a male factor. And when he mentioned it to his co-firefighters, they made a lot of fun out of him, and it was a terrible experience.
Right.
So, it's ridiculous, but that's what sort of the societal bias is.
Yeah, yeah. So men don't like to talk as much, but when you get them in the right environment and the right guy that's into that, I mean, the psychological interventions must be huge, because most men go through this without having a single person to talk to.
Okay, but what psychological interventions, Spence?
Oh, I do.
Have you ever heard? I mean, that's what's so sad is, honestly, I think with the FertiStrong app, I think it's one of the first entities ever designed for just men. I can't think of research which looks at psychological interventions for men with infertility.
Right. Yeah.
They are the ignored part of the couple.
Yeah. Yeah. For years, the male partner going through IVF, we've taken perceived stress scores. So someday we'll have to review that data. But
you should publish that data, because people are finally waking up and beginning to realize that these men are suffering too.
Yeah, it's not that they're relaxed on the sidelines, that's for sure. And it's always done on embryo transfer day, so with the women, and there's a couple controls. So we will. I'm not a researcher, so I need help, but we've been collecting data.
Easy, very easy.
Okay, good. I'll talk to you maybe. But while we're on the men's side, this FertiStrong, can you talk? It's this new app. Can you talk about it?
Yeah, so let me just tell you how FertiCom came out and why we decided to do it. So, I've been doing Mind Body for a lot of years, and I was at a Resolve event about 2.5 years ago, and Elizabeth Grill, who's sort of my equivalent at Cornell Medical Center in New York, and, I had trained her to do Mind Body, and she said, have you ever thought about doing an app? And I'm like, look at me, I have gray hair, do you think I know anything about apps? Anyway, so, she and I literally sat down at this event, and she said, I have patients coming in every day, and there are all these relaxation apps out there. There's Headspace, and there's Calm, and there's Insight Timer, and none of them are infertility specific.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So she and I literally sat down and with a napkin designed the app. And I think 1.5 years later, it was released in the U.S. So we got a pharmaceutical company, Ferring, to sponsor us, so it's free for patients, and it was just released in Canada.
Wow.
It came out in Canada, I think, 2 weeks ago.
That's great.
And the basic idea, I don't know if you can see this. This is the flyer. So what Liz and I did, we actually in Chicago for a weekend for different conferences, and we came up with the 50 situations which cause our patients the most stress.
Okay, wow.
So it could be, you're at a family event and someone announces a pregnancy.
Right.
Or you're at work and you get your period. Or you're driving somewhere and the doctor calls with bad test results. So we came up with 50 scenarios, and we're both cognitive behavioral therapists. And so for every scenario, and it's all flowered, so it looks like a flower, there's six different cognitive behavioral solutions. So there's how to use humor in that situation, how to self-nurture. We have 10 guided relaxations. What you can do cognitively, how can you think in a different way, what to do behaviorally, like go in the bathroom, get away. And the one I like the best is what we call social solutions.
Right.
So for all the stupid things people say to you, we have a polite response and an education. Like if someone says something stupid, you don't think on your feet. You don't know exactly what to say. Yeah. So we've given you scripts for all 50 situations.
Wow.
So FertiCom came out exactly 1 year ago. It was April of 2017, and it's been very successful. And we have over 10,000 users.
Wow.
And so I think pretty soon after it came out, Ferring came to us and said, we really want one for men, which I thought was really cool. And
really? That's great.
I think the only criticism we ever had about FertiCom was it was designed for women. It's very pastel-y and beautiful. Yeah. So, Liz and I are not experts in male factor or in men with infertility, so we hired 2 of our colleagues, Janet Takafman, who's from Montreal, and Bill Peacock from Baltimore, who both specialize in working with men, and they wrote the content. Right. And it's really like FertiCom, it's just not pretty. It's a tree instead of a flower.
It's got motorbikes on it. It's got motorbikes on it and stuff,
That's right. And they came up with the 50 situations which are most stressful for men. And it's the same idea, cognitive behavior therapy and relaxation. And it came out in the U.S. a week and a half ago. So
awesome.
We have no idea, and there's going to be a real launch right before Father's Day.
And that will be available just for my Canadian listeners to hear.
You know what? It's up to Ferring Canada.
Okay.
So if they want it in Canada, it'll be available in Canada. But it's not up to us.
Well, I will put my word in with one of the reps I know. So thank you.
Please do.
Yeah.
They just got Ferticom about 3 weeks ago because we had to get it. So the U.S. versions are translated into Spanish.
Okay.
So to be released in Canada, we all had to have it be in French as well. Yeah. So Ferticom is now available in English and French Canadian.
Oh wow! Okay. Well, that's it's a perfect place for you to at the Canadian equivalent to ASRM. CFAS is in Montreal this year, so really close to you. So you should knock on their door for sure, because that would be a good route in. I'm sure Ferring is a sponsor as always.
I'm sure they will be.
Yeah. But so that's great. So what so Conquering Infertility, these two fantastic apps. I mean, do they have meditations, like guided meditations?
Yeah, it's actually they're 10 in my voice. There are 5 that are like minis.
Yeah.
Like if you're at work and you get bad news, you go in the bathroom and you listen to my voice for 2 minutes.
Right.
And then there are 5 that are longer, like meditation and progressive muscle relaxation imagery.
Oh, that's great. Those things are lifesavers to so many of my patients, and because it gets so crazy, like to a point where an invitation to a 1-year-old birthday party of a friend can, like, the whole week is gone. It's
like being stabbed.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, but these little things are what get people back on I don't know how to put it, but on top of in control of their choices in their day, and they kind of get strong again.
But our patients feel so out of control, out of every aspect of their lives, and so anything that they can do to increase their sense of control is going to help them.
Yeah. But I love what why I wanted you on the show. There are a lot of people popping up, in this realm, in this field, claiming to be whoever, and coaching programs or whatever. I had one of my patients tell me that she was looking into a coaching program and it was quite expensive, and when that was expressed, the coach on the other end just simply said, well, then you're not ready to get pregnant if you're not ready. Is that crazy? Literally. Okay, so I just had a
patient come see me, and she says, I talked to someone who's a coach who offers a mind-body program, and it's $2,000.
Right.
And I said, so tell me what's in the program. And it was all ridiculous. And it's all science-based. And we're not going to, what I tell my, if you call a practitioner, it is. It's not going to happen. We don't have that much control over our fertility. And for a practitioner to say, you're not ready to be pregnant, I mean, she should lose her license. It's disgusting.
I don't think she has any sort of license. I don't know. You can become a coach or whatever without any sort of professional body. But, it just, I love what you're doing. Obviously, I have self-interest, but even within the acupuncture world, there's schools that are very, mechanistic and science-based. But the further you go into any condition, any medical condition that I have seen, and with what I'm doing, the spiritual component or the mind-body component is just, it ends up being, you get the mechanics wrapped up with a bow because you can put systems in place, but the other is where, wow, the true healing really, really needs to, and most often in my experience does occur.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
So what's next for Alice?
Well, I got good news this morning. I had been approached by Cambridge University Press about co-editing a textbook and they actually approved it this morning. And so I'm going to be the first author of it. And it blows my mind. If someone had said to me 30 years ago that Cambridge University Press was going to have a textbook on infertility treatment, so ART, and that a third of it was going to be on patient-centered care, and that a psychologist would be the first author, I would have laughed out the window.
Right.
And that's actually happening. We just got the contract this morning.
Congratulations.
So,
awesome.
I mean, it shows how far our field has come. Mm-hmm. That, probably one of the most prestigious university presses in the world feels that the reproductive medicine has to include the patient's mind and body and soul.
Right.
And that's probably the biggest endorsement I've ever had in my career.
That is, you know what, I would like to think that you've helped create that change, Alice, and thank you. That. Yeah. That's, I mean, even from when I started. Yeah.
And I go to the American fertility meetings.
Yeah.
For the first, 10, 20 years, I would cry.
Yeah.
People weren't. And it's very different now. You feel like a rock star when you go to these meetings now. It's like all of a sudden, patient-centered care is so interesting to people.
Yeah. That is so great that is happening. I mean, at ASRM, there is going to be the first time ever a pre-symposium full day on acupuncture integration.
Fantastic.
Crazy, right? Wow. I mean, I know some of the people involved. They're brilliant, and I'm so excited for that. And
Fantastic.
That's great. And the next step too, from my perspective, I'm a guy, so I'm really passionate about that side. And thank you for talking about that and creating this FertiStrong app for men, because it's, there is very little out there, and things for men need to be very tangible and simple and quite private, and that is a great inroads. I'm excited to check it out a lot deeper, because I will recommend it to all my men. And
we just get it out there in Canada.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I also a motivator for men often is this. Have you ever heard of the website Don't Cook Your Balls?
Yes.
Yeah, they've got a great quiz for men, and I recommend everyone go to do that, because it empowers men to just a simple outlook on what they're doing that may be helping and hindering, and some ideas of how they could maybe change their trajectory in life a little bit to help their fertility. So men need to come up with the ideas. They can't all come from their wife. So that's
absolutely
a good, yeah. So this sounds like very similar, like once they're done that quiz on Don't Cook Your Balls, they should be recommended this app.
I would love that. What I forgot to say was for FertiCom, the one for women, it's really all about how they can they use the strategies to feel less anxious and less depressed and less stressed. For FertiStrong, it's probably half what men can do for themselves,
right,
and it's half what men can do for their partners.
Right. Yeah.
Because I think half of the stress for men is the distress level of their wives.
Totally agree, especially being a guy, and my experience. It's if my wife's happy, I am way more likely to be super happy too.
Okay, I got my husband a T-shirt a couple of years ago that actually says "Happy Wife, Happy Life." Yes,
my wife says that to me all the time.
Yeah.
So,
it took him a while, but he's figured it out.
Yeah, good. Anyway, so is there anything you want to leave women with, like anything to focus on? And then I also want to make sure we'll have all these websites for these apps and stuff in the show notes here for sure below you if you're watching it on the website. But ferticom.com and FertiStrong.com and Dr. Alice Domar, DOMAR.com. If you're just for the listeners, those are, you Google Alice Domar and you will find these things too as well, I'm sure. And so congratulations on that Cambridge text. That is monumental.
As I said, I literally was lying in bed this morning checking my email, and it was like, and I said, I used an expletive, and my husband was like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "No, this is actually amazingly good."
Yeah.
So, and I have a big birthday tomorrow, so that's a really good birthday present.
Yeah. Oh, it's your birthday. Oh, happy birthday.
It's a big birthday tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's a hard birthday tomorrow, so
Okay.
it's a good birthday present. Yeah.
Okay, that'll sand off the rough
Make it a little
edges of
easier.
it. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, any last words to the women out there that, and men, that are in the middle of their journey, because that's mostly who will be listening and watching.
Yeah, I would say, what the research shows is that most people going through infertility say it's the hardest experience of their lives, and I very much get that. Procreation is the strongest instinct there is. And given that it is such a challenging time, take advantage of anything you can that has the potential to help you feel better. Whether it's acupuncture or seeing a psychologist or I mean, in the U.S., there are 8 or 10 million people with infertility. I actually don't know the numbers in Canada.
I think they mirror.
Down the street, I think in Canada it's 1 out of 6.
Yeah.
So you walk down the street, you're going to walk past somebody who's either been through infertility or is going through infertility.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're at that 1-year-old birthday party, and you can, if there's other people without children, you can almost, you may not be.
Okay, no, Spence, you don't go to the 1-year-old birthday party.
Yeah, you don't go to the 1-year-old. Well, when you're still in that place.
Yeah. That day. Yeah. No, that's one of the things on the app. What do you do if you're invited to a baby shower or a birthday party and you do not go? Absolutely not.
It is
a vicious stomach bug. You get a vicious stomach bug that morning.
Yeah. Yes, right. Yes.
The norovirus. Yeah. Stay home. So I actually have to run because I have a patient waiting for me.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah. No, that's perfect. Thank you so much for your time, and sorry about the little technical difficulties at the start. But I am so honored and so grateful, and thank you so much on behalf of everyone listening and watching for taking some time out.
Thanks so much.
All right. Take care, Alice. Thank you so much.